What's going on? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and up next we're going to talk about some pretty unique books from the Bronze Age. These are price variants, but the interesting thing is I think I found what I would call a pretty undervalued key out of these price variants. So stay tuned and we're going to go over some of those big price variants from the Bronze Age. Alright, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So I want to remind everybody one more time that I have a giveaway going on right now in my prior video, the one about the most expensive comic book I have ever bought. I have a giveaway as part of that video, so make sure to check that video out and follow the instructions there if you'd like a chance to get the book that I'm giving away. Now, I say this all the time, this is part of why I do these videos. Within anything, knowledge is power. The more you know, the better off you are in whether it's in a hobby, a sport, work, life, whatever. And so within this hobby, within something that I also do as a business, I've talked about, it's very important to know about as much as possible when it comes to comics, because you never know what you're going to come across out there. And there are all kinds of little niches and everything for collectors and different books that carry a lot of value that you might not be all that familiar with. And this is one of them. And so what this is a price variant. The price variant is the 30-cent variant. And you can see I have a standard 25-cent price copy of this book, 9.6. This one's 25 cents, and you can see the difference here. You got the 30-cent one. It looks a little different as well. And usually you're gonna get these price variants around the time when the normal book says still only. When they're advertising still only, it means they're getting ready to raise the price within an issue or two. And so that's when you'll often see these price variants. Now, those price variants aren't always worth significantly more money or even any more money. It can kind of be like the National Diamond inserts or Mark Jewelers inserts, that kind of thing, where if it's just your kind of standard run-of-the-mill book, might not really add all that much value. It might make the book a little bit more desirable, which maybe it'll sell a little quicker, but the price might not change that much. But when it comes to key issues, there can be significant increases in value. And I'm not talking about 1, 2, 3 times more, a lot more than that. So with these price variant books, like I've mentioned, there are certain collectors that really like going after these. Just a lot of times it's anything where there's rarity, where it's something that's a little less common. People like to go after those types of books. And there were two main ones. There's the 25 to 30 cent jump, and then there's the 30 to 35 cent jump. And they happened in 1976 and 1977 respectively. So that's the time period when you'll see these, and you'll see them across all kinds of titles, but they don't always overlap with a key. And so those important ones are when they overlap with a key. And so I'm going to talk about 5 different price variant books from this time period. We'll go over what the standard book sells for, what the price variant sells for, and maybe one that I think really looks pretty undervalued. So I think this will be an interesting set of books to talk about. Again, if you don't even know that it exists, you never know to really look for it, or if you happen to come across one of these really rare, valuable books. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Eternals #1. It's this book right here. And one thing that I just thought was really interesting, because I'd never had this book before, and I definitely had never had a raw copy of this book before, that I'd show real quick. When I was flipping through it, just doing my standard, page count check, that kind of stuff, I wasn't sure what the indicia would say, which is that the little description on the first page that gives the details about the book. I wasn't sure if it would say 30 cent or 25 cent. I could probably look it up on like the CGC forums or something and somebody would talk about it. But I thought it was really interesting that you can see here, it says 25 cent copy. So it's, let's see here, right here, 25 cent copy. So the only thing that is different is they just changed the cover price. It doesn't even change in the actual indicia, in the description inside the book. So just something that I thought was really interesting. I thought maybe it would say 30 cent in there for this one, but it doesn't. It seems like they didn't change the interior one bit at all, exact same interior, just that slight difference on the cover. And so Eternals #1 didn't used to be a book where that price variant was really worth very much more money. It was really because of, obviously, the Eternals movie, the use of them in the MCU, that spiked the value of those books. A 9.8 of that book used to sell for, in the 25 cent, used to be like $150, $200 book. It peaked around $4,000. It's now fallen to around $1,200 to $1,500, but still, that's way up from where it was, say, 5 or 6 years ago. Now, this is where something like the CGC census becomes very useful in identifying how rare certain books are. And so with Eternals #1, with the 25 cent version, there are 8,171 copies of that book graded, universal copies. With the 30 cent version, just 375. And you've got to remember, with the 30 cent versions, people are more likely to get lower grade copies graded. So there are actually probably way more, even more than, in terms of percent difference, more of the 25 cent than the 30 cent. So with that, there are about 21 times more copies of the 25 than the 30 that are graded. But in reality, I bet it's even higher than that because people will get those lower grade copies graded because of the value. So the grade that I looked at for this book, I couldn't use the same grades across these because some of them sell so rarely. I had to find a recent sale, something even within the last 6 months. This one sells a little more often. I looked at the 90-day average for a CGC 8.5. 25 cent variant sold for $128. 30 cent variant, $625. Sells for almost 400% more, 388% more than the 25 cent copy. So generally what I saw, I looked at a number of grades, and it was generally selling for about 4 to 5 times what the 25 cent copy sells for. So for example, an 8.5 of the 30 cent variant sells for more than what a 9.6 is selling for right now. And that really gives you an idea of how much value is really there when you're talking about these price variants with key issues. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is Marvel Spotlight #28. This one was also in 1976. This is the first Moon Knight solo story, and it has been a super hot book. Moon Knight, I mean, again, it was a character that really, it had a niche set of collectors, but really didn't have a ton of value until we started to hear that we were going to get a Moon Knight TV show, and it's just exploded since then. Now this one, on the census, there are 2,101 of the 25 cent copies, and there are just 109 of the 30 cent copies graded as a universal CGC grade. So very similarly to Eternals #1, there are 19 times more copies of the 25 cent than the 30 cent, and the price difference, though, isn't quite as big with this one. The price difference, I looked at it as CGC 9.2 because this is a book with only 109 graded copies. You don't see this book sell very often. It does not sell all that often. For the 25 cent, selling for about $574. For the 30 cent, selling for $1,199. So yeah, that seems significant. It's 109% more, but in comparison to what Eternals #1 was selling for almost 400% more. I mean, this one seems maybe undervalued right now. Maybe those variants haven't really caught up in price yet, because the 25 cents have moved really fast, but because so few sell of the 30 cent, maybe that's one that's undervalued right now. So I did look across other grades for a couple other that had sold, and it generally was selling for about 2 times more. So a really interesting one to me in terms of value, because it doesn't have that big jump that something like Eternals 1 does, when Moon Knight seems like a much more popular character right now. All right, now #3, this is a big boy. We're starting to get into some of the real big price variant books. If you go into Overstreet and you look at the most expensive Bronze Age keys, this is one of the ones that shows up. Now, this one is from 1977, and this is when we're getting into the 30 and 35 cent price variants. And I actually just picked up a copy of the 30 cent one, and that is Iron Fist #14. But the 35 cent variant is one of the most desirable Bronze Age books that's out there. Now, I used to have a 9.2 of this book. I sold it about a week ago because I was making a push to try to pick up a copy of first print TMNT 1, and I ended up not getting it, but I had to try to move some books quick, so I had the money, and but ended up going a little more than I had wanted to spend. But I had to take that chance because it's one of the books I'd really love to get at some point. But I still have this 5.5 right now, and with the 30-cent variant, with that book, there are 5,247 universal copies out there. With the 35-cent, 64. There are 64 universal copies graded. There are 81 times more copies of the 30-cent versus the 35, and I bet, like I said, that number is even bigger because people are going to grade anything that they get with the 35-cent variant because it is worth so much money. And so this is just a super, super rare book. Now, these just never sell, so I had to use older price data. With only 64 copies out there, I mean, this is getting into the territory of like rare golden age books. They rarely ever sell. Now, I had to look at the 2020 price average, and for a CGC 7.5, 30 cent in 2020 was selling for $267. 35 cent sold for $3,800, over 1,300% more than the 30-cent variant. And this does vary across grades, but it gets even bigger. It generally sells for about 14 to 16 times what the standard 30-cent book sells for. Just astounding numbers. And that's why this knowledge is really important. If you come across a 35-cent copy of this book, it is worth so much money. Even if you don't think it is, if you think it's a piece of trash, if it's like a 2.0, it is still an extremely valuable book. Now, the highest sale ever for that book, and it's actually the highest grade because there is no 9.8, it was for a 9.6. In May of 2020, it sold for $15,025. And that's when a 9.6 of the 30 cent was selling for just $882. And so if we look at what a 30 cent is selling for now, it sells for about $2,000. If that 35-cent book came up today, it would probably break $30,000 for that 9.6. That's why it is just one of the most valuable Bronze Age books out there. That's more than Amazing Spider-Man 129. That's more than Giant Size X-Men 1 when we're talking about a 9.6. It's more than Giant Size X-Men 1, more than Hulk 181. I mean, or around the price of Hulk 181. So to put that in perspective, that first appearance of Sabretooth selling for about the same price as Hulk 181, and in many grades probably selling for more. All right, now number 4, the next one on the list is Star Wars number 2. Again, 1977. This is the first appearance of Han Solo in comics. Some people don't like the first appearance in comics or whatever, but that's what it is, and that's actually a book that's probably going to get more and more valuable as the Disney Plus show comes out. This one, again, a pretty rare book. On the census, there are 2,431 copies of the 30-cent graded and just 128 copies of the 35-cent. So again, about 19 times more copies of this than the 30-cent version, which is actually almost exactly the same as Marvel Spotlight 28 and Eternals number 1. But the price difference for this one is very, very different. So for this one, I looked at the 90-day average for a CGC 9.0. The 30 cent has been selling for about $232, the standard book. The 35 cent, $3,750. This book, with the price variant, sells for over 1,500% more than the standard priced copy. And I looked at multiple grades. Generally, it's in that range of 15 to 16 times as much as the standard price book. And this is another one of those things that I think is really interesting because it's got about the same population difference as Marvel Spotlight 28, but this one sells for significantly more. Now, Star Wars has a much bigger fan base than Moon Knight. But if Moon Knight gains popularity, if it ends up becoming a really popular show or a popular character, and so that one becomes a book that I think is potentially a really undervalued book that you might want to be looking for. All right, now down to the last one. This is the biggest book on this list. And if you check, again, Overstreet, this is the most valuable book of the Bronze Age. And this is Star Wars number 1 with the 35-cent variant. Again, this was where they were just testing in a few markets, putting out that book with the 35-cent price versus the 30-cent price. It's not really known how many of them are out there, but I think it's pretty safe to say a pretty high percentage of them are probably graded, really to make sure that you get a real book and that you have that actual value in there, because there are lots of reprints for these books, and so it can get very confusing with the pricing, and it matters what it looks like up in the corner, if it's the diamond or the squares, or if all this kinds of stuff. And so it can be potentially tricky or confusing. Just because you see a 35-cent copy does not mean it is the 35-cent price variant. Now, on the census for this one, for the 30-cent, the standard price, there are 11,445 copies graded. I mean, one of the most popular franchises of all time. There's going to be a ton of books out there because there's a ton of demand for those books. The 35-cent, just 249 universal copies graded. So yeah, that is more than how many are graded for Star Wars 2 or any of the other books I've talked about. But when you look at the difference, there are 46 times more copies of the 30-cent than the 35. Now, oddly enough, that is not as big of a difference as you get with Iron Fist number 14. It's part of why that one book is so extremely valuable. But when we start looking at the price differences, oh man. So I looked at two different grades just to kind of give you an idea what the prices are like with this. So for a 5.0, the 90-day average, the 30-cent, $175. The 35-cent, $6,406. That it sells for 3,500% more than the standard copy. Just crushes every other price variant out there. Then if we go to a 9.4, which had a sale in September of 2021, the 30-cent at that time was selling for about $740. The 35-cent sold for $40,800. It sells for 5,400% more than the standard copy. And that's what I'm talking about here, selling for 30 to 50 times more than the standard 30-cent copy, depending on the grade, depending on the day of the sale, who's watching the sale, all that kind of stuff. Now, the highest grade is a 9.6 that exists out there, but that 9.6 hasn't had any recent sales data, so no idea what that one would end up selling for. But if a 9.8 ever showed up, ever was graded and came up for sale, I would almost guarantee, if not, I'd say I would guarantee the 9.8 of that book would sell for the most of any 9.8 from the Bronze Age. It would beat Marvel Spotlight number 5 that had that $264,000 sale or whatever. It would just destroy Hulk 181, which is only around 90 to 100,000. Destroy Giant Size X-Men 1, which has been ranging from 35 to 70,000. That book, I would estimate, would sell anywhere from 350 to 500,000, and you never know, as being the single copy, if that's what happened, the single highest copy as at a 9.8, I could see it going even higher than that. And so that's why having that knowledge about these books is so important, because there is so much value in these price variants. And if you don't know about them, you could overlook something that you're going through and think, oh, I'm not going to pick up that Iron Fist 14. It looks like it's a little overpriced. If somebody happened to price it like a 30-cent, when in reality it's worth 15 plus times more than what was listed there. So knowledge is power there, and that's why, again, I think the undervalued book on here is Marvel Spotlight 28. I mean, when you've got Eternals #1, a book where people are crapping all over the Eternals now, still selling for 5 to 6 times what the 25-cent copy sells for, and then you've got Moon Knight, Marvel Spotlight #28, first solo story, a popular book in its own right, and a book where you've got potentially a lot of people getting interested in that character moving forward. That one only selling for 2x, double what the standard price copy sells for. I think that seems crazy. It seems like a big outlier here with these price variants. So definitely a book that, now that I've seen that, I'm going to be on the lookout for it, and I would recommend maybe other people, just maybe not a super risky book to pick up. You might have some really high potential moves in that book without taking a whole lot of risk in it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. I've got more videos over here if you'd like to watch some of my other videos, and the subscription button right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I would really appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.